What's good, YouTubers and YouTubettes? This is JB Sports, back again with another one. For the last several weeks, it's been a debate in boxing. Who is the face and cash cow of boxing? Is it Canelo-Alvarez, who over the last several years has held that title? Or is it the new kid on the block, Gervonta Tank Davis, the self-proclaimed face of boxing, the self-proclaimed cash cow of the sport? And I'm here to tell you right here and now that currently the cash cow and face of boxing is Gervonta Tank Davis. Look at the numbers that he produced in his last outing versus Ryan Garcia. He did 1.2 million pay-per-view buys. That's what my source is telling me. Now, you've had some numbers out here that begs to differ. Rick Glazer said the fight did around 900,000 pay-per-view buys. That's what his source is telling him. Ray Jackson on his Twitter page is saying that the fight did over 1.5 million pay-per-view buys. You've had several different media outlets reporting that the fight did 1.4 million pay-per-view buys. But my source, which is credible, have never led me astray when telling me about the numbers that these events do, is telling me that the fight did 1.2 million pay-per-view buys. Now, Canelo-Alvarez, who just fought this past Saturday in his hometown of Guadalajara, Mexico, the fight took place on the DAZN pay-per-view. It was 55,000 fans in attendance. I don't know what the gate numbers is, but my source is telling me that fight did 220 to 235,000 pay-per-view buys. So, what that means is the face of boxing, the cash cow of the sport, is undoubtedly Gervonta Tank Davis. I know a lot of people gonna say, wait a minute, JB Sports, you're jumping the gun. Look at what Canelo-Alvarez has done over the years. He's done great numbers on pay-per-view. He did 1.1 million pay-per-view buys in the second Triple G fight. In the first Triple G fight, he did 1.3 million pay-per-view buys. He did over 1 million pay-per-view buys versus Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. He has shown you that he is that dude over his career, especially when he was the A-side on pay-per-view. He did 800,000 pay-per-view buys versus Caleb Plant, a guy that was debuting his first time headlining a pay-per-view event. Well, Tank Davis in his fight with Ryan Garcia, and that was Ryan Garcia's first time headlining, or well, I ain't gonna say headlining a pay-per-view event, being part of a main event pay-per-view fight. That fight did 1.2 million pay-per-view buys. So make no mistake about it, Gervonta Tank Davis is the cash cow of boxing. He is the face of the sweet science. Make no mistake about it. This is not a lifetime achievement award. We ain't going on what he did back in 2017 and 2018. We're not going that far back. I'm talking about what we're talking about is what's going on right here and now. So as we stand here today, the current face and cash cow of boxing is Gervonta Tank Davis. Look at the numbers, ladies and gentlemen. Tank Garcia did 1.2 million pay-per-view buys. Canelo-Ryder did 220 to 235,000 pay-per-view buys. What are we arguing about? It's clear cut. It's black and white. It is what it is. It is what it is. Just like Canelo took the throne from Mayweather, Mayweather took the throne from Oscar De La Hoya, Tank Davis has taken the throne from Canelo-Alvarez. Canelo-Alvarez and his team need to make a decision. If you're going to fight Bivol 2 in your next outing, don't expect that fight to do great numbers either. Let's see what Tank does. A lot of people say, well, what Tank going to do when he ain't fighting Ryan Garcia? He was doing 200,000 when he was fighting anybody outside of Ryan Garcia. Well, the fight between Tank versus Rolly Romero, my source is telling me it did 275,000 pay-per-view buys. But Rolly Romero just did an interview and said that fight did bigger numbers than what's being reported. So we will see what happens, and we will see what transpires in his last outing versus Hector Garcia, who was a guy that didn't have the cachet in the sport of boxing. His name ID was very low. He was a champion coming up from 130 to 135. That fight did in the range of 200 to 215,000 pay-per-view buys. John Ryder had a whole country behind him. The UK, that's the boxing capital, according to many. Not according to yours truly, but according to many, London has replaced US as the capital of boxing. Let Canelo fight David Morrell. That'll probably be similar to what Tank fighting Hector Garcia, and see what type of numbers he do. He probably not even going to do 220 to 235,000 that he did with John Ryder. So make no mistake about it, Tank Davis is the face of boxing. Tank Davis is the cash cow of the sweet science. It is what it is. Don't get mad at the message. And don't get mad at the messenger, because I'm just speaking truth to power. And the dude that got all the power when it comes to the sport of boxing, the guy that's putting up the big-time pay-per-view buys and producing the gates, is definitely Gervonta Tank Davis. Let's see what type of gate that Canelo did with Ryder. That number has not been reported yet. Now, we do know the fight was sold out. 55,000 fans were in attendance for that fight. But you know those seats were not as expensive as the seats were for Gervonta Tank Davis. I heard that the front row seats for Gervonta Tank Davis versus Ryan Garcia was averaging out to $1,500 a seat. And you could bet your bottom dollar they ain't have no seat at Canelo Alvarez versus Ryder for that much. Probably the more expensive seat was when you talk about the seats close to the ring, those tickets probably run about $150 to $200, somewhere in that range if I had to guess. Somewhere in that range. And give Canelo Alvarez credit for taking a pay cut, because he only made $10 million guaranteed for that fight. Now, if the fight sold over 500,000 pay-per-view buys, he would have got $33 million. But that's gone down the drain. That's not happening. The fight has failed well short of 500,000. The highest that they think the fight will ultimately generate is 235,000. So that's coming up shorter than a midget on his knees. So he's going to have to accept well below $33 million, what he has been averaging out in his last several fights with Matchroom Boxing. So we will see what happens, and we will see what transpires. But make no mistake about it, ladies and gentlemen, Gervonta Tank Davis is the face of boxing. Gervonta Tank Davis is the cash cow of the sport. So we will see what happens, and we will see what transpires. Now, if I'm Canelo, based on them numbers, now Canelo got generational wealth, so he can fight who he want to fight. And he's steadfastly stating that he wants to fight Dimitri Bivol in the rematch. And let's see what the numbers that produce. I wouldn't be a bit surprised to satisfy Bivol, because Bivol wants that fight to be at 168. If he fights him at 175, he's going to probably want at least $10 million. He's going to want at least what Caleb Plant got. So can Matchroom Boxing afford to pay him that type of money, or will Matchroom Boxing take Canelo Bivol 2 over to Saudi Arabia, where we all know they got all the oil money and they got them deep pockets, and they might be able to make that happen for Dimitri Bivol. So we will see what happens, and we will see what transpires. But if I had to bet, I would say that fight probably would take place back in Las Vegas, maybe outside chance they can put over there in Cowboy Stadium, because I did like how it looked on TV, man. The crowd seemed like it was on top of the ring, man. They had a nice, how they had the set up with the ring right in the middle of the soccer stadium, and they had the seats, the floor seats, right next to the rings, and the way they had the seats set up, it looked real good on TV. So maybe Canelo's and his team will be wanting to go back to a stadium, and maybe Cowboy Stadium could be a venue. I think the last time he fought in Cowboy Stadium was probably about 3-4 years ago against Liam Smith, another UK fighter. So maybe they'll look to make that fight over there in Cowboy Stadium. But if I had to make a educated guess, that fight's going to probably be right back in Vegas with the Cowboy Stadium as a possibility, and maybe even Saudi Arabia, especially if Dimitri Bivol asked for way, way more than he made in the first fight. Now, he definitely deserved more money than he got paid in the first fight, but how much more? That's up to negotiations between the two teams. So we will see what happens, and we will see what transpires. But we do know that Bivol tried to make a fight with Better Be, but Top Rank was not interested. They didn't believe it was enough money in the pot for Top Rank and Matchroom to come together. So Bivol, despite coming off 2 career best wins over Canelo and Zerto, is still a guy that's not a big name in the sport of boxing. Name is bigger than it was before the Canelo fight, but still not one of the faces of the sport. So we will see what happens, and we will see what transpires. But if Canelo do want to do the numbers that he did back when he was the cash cow in face of boxing, he needs to fight the Mexican monster, David Benavidez. And I'm pretty much sure that fight, at the very minimum, would do the numbers that Canelo versus Caleb Plant did, which did 800,000 on Showtime pay-per-view. So he wants to get back to doing those type of numbers, and we haven't seen him do those type of numbers since the Caleb Plant fight. Even the third Triple G fight, that fight produced 575,000 pay-per-view buys, well short of what he had been doing previously. So we will see what happens, and we will see what transpires. Follow me on Facebook, Gerard Briscoe. Like, share, and subscribe to JB Sports, the man, the myth, the legend, and I holla.